I really do like the song. Like, and
It's pretty
especially
cool.
like day after Cinco de Mayo, it's like if you wake up to this, like after, just absolutely celebrating how the Mexicans trashed the French, there's a very satisfying feel to this, to the horns in that song.
It is as well. And welcome, my friends, to a very different show today. Whilst James and I do the other side of cyber every week at the same back channel, same back time, we're trying something new today. We're actually going to be streaming live onto Clubhouse. So the only odd thing about that is both of our voices come out of my picture. So I've changed it to both of us. So if you are on Clubhouse, then you're listening right now, you can duck over there. Otherwise, you will find us live on LinkedIn and YouTube. Are we Twitter or are we still just LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook?
LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. I refuse to support Twitter. And by the way, so
Yes.
we did a Clubhouse room on Monday, right? And we said that Facebook was going to do this whole iOS 14.5 update, and they were going to make you share information. And if you don't, it doesn't work. Hi, Kat.
Yes. Yeah, Kat.
I got the pop-up from Facebook. I said, I don't want you to track me cross app. And I still got Facebook.
Wow. That's amazing.
So in your face, Zuck, you're not making money off of me anymore. Not cross app tracking. You better start lowering my ARPU.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And today is, guess what? It is World Password Day. Boom tish. Did that work properly?
Yeah. Do you like how it's spelled password on our little crayon little ticker thing on the bottom?
Look at that. That is impressive.
That is how you do, by the way, a secure password. Just so people
know.
And
for those people who can't see, it's PA$WO0RD. Oh, I just got that ticker before it went off the stage. That was hilarious. Okay, so International Password Day. I think this is the most interesting one for me, James. Do you want to know why? Do you want to know the fascination behind it all?
I do. I would love to.
Since 2013 and probably beyond, we have had the same password be the most commonly used password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has not changed. I repeat, it has not changed. And the top 10 are pretty much the same. We've got password. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have welcome. We have the same things every time. And we have World Password Day every year. We go on about passwords in the world of cybersecurity, and people still are using their birthdays in their password. In fact, I think close to 50% of people that Google did big research on are using their birthday in their password. What do we have to do to get people to understand the critical nature of passwords?
You're not going to. Sometimes the best way to admit you have a problem, the best way to admit that you have a problem is to admit you have a problem. No, what am I saying?
I don't know.
Early. What do I want to say? I want to say the best way to know is to admit that you have a problem, something along those lines. We have a problem, and the problem is that we have security people say that you should come up, dear user who uses his devices for all these things, and we want to give you convenience, but you should be inconvenient when it comes to your passwords, and please don't use your birthday, your dog's name, your kid's name. And that's not really the case.
No, it isn't.
And so we need to look at this from a different perspective of how could we fortify passwords more? So multi-factor authentication is a great thing of doing. Roger, who works with you over at KnowBe4, and we've done a few shows. Yeah, we've done a few shows on hacking MFA and essentially passwords and all that stuff. And I think that's really important. And the second piece to this, and I think a really big one, is we need to stop complaining about users and start really explaining to users the idea of policy behind why it's important to have a complex password. But then you get these researchers that come out and they go, it doesn't matter how complex your password is, a quantum computer could crack it in 12 seconds. And you're like, well, then I'm fighting a losing battle to begin with. So why am I fighting?
Yeah, but James, do you know how many, my apologies. And James, were you aware the amount of professionals in the IT world who I talk to on a daily basis Very few of them will say they have a password manager. They haven't got around to it yet.
I don't do a password manager.
Why not?
I don't want a password manager.
How many passwords do you have to memorize? The average person has between 70 and 80. I've got over 200.
So I probably have over 100 passwords. But
And
I do it differently. I really do. I do it different.
You don't have to share what you do, by the way. That's an interest.
I don't use a password manager. I don't trust them.
Okay. Why don't you trust them?
Because to me, they're another attack vector. So I don't have to now necessarily get into my device, but I can get into multiple. I can just go after your password manager, and voila, I've got the keys to the kingdom.
Yep.
Like, to me, like, the idea of solving this through a password, solving the password dilemma through a password manager is like putting a fox in a hen house to guard the hens.
Yeah, I understand that. I do. I also think that because there are tools you can use within the password manager tool itself, where there is an extra element of protection, I know for a fact I could not remember good enough passwords for all of those logins. I just couldn't.
So what if you set to renew your password every 30 days, which is what I do with most of my accounts. I set it up so that my password gets renewed every 30 days.
Yep.
And you build a system that you memorize yourself of how you do your passwords.
Yeah, look, yes, this is the interesting thing with I say passwords, you say passwords. I say tomato, you say tomato.
Passwords.
I just
You'd like to hear about my passwords.
My passwords. The other interesting thing is, we talked about this before, and we'll move on to our other topic shortly, is the writing passwords down. I don't have an issue with that. And the last time we had a conversation, no, I think it's okay if you manage them correctly. And that would be no different than finding your own way of managing your password process and how you go about changing them, your method and the way you go about it. Would that be fair to say, or is it really what suits you? Is it not a one size fits all here for passwords?
So I used to be very much against writing passwords down when you're in a jointed workspace with other
Agreed.
employees. With people working from home now, the threat vector's been dwindled. So, I can't tell someone at home as a CISO or a CISO to
ISO password.
To keep a clean desk policy. I can have that in the office, but I can't come to JJ, say, JJ,
yes, James,
clean desk policy.
Oh,
Don't
God.
write anything down. You'd look at me and be like, go screw yourself. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do. It's my house. You're not paying me to, you don't control my house. This is my temple, my space.
But at the same time, I think I would be more inclined if now with the remote work, I'm using corporate equipment. In many cases, people are actually buying tables, proper office desks and office chairs, and the setup. That investment does come from many companies, or a portion of it. If not, you're claiming it on tax. But if you are working at home remotely, you do actually, in my opinion, have a duty of care to protect that equipment and that information with a different level than you would in the office, because there's those other things in play.
Again, when you talk about it in a perspective like that, you're making an argument that I think an organization is, I think, is an overreach.
How so?
So
well, maybe I'm a rule follower, so I maybe.
I'm not saying I'm not a rule follower and I'm a code breaker or a rule breaker, but what I am saying is, as the company that you work for, it leases your time.
Yep.
You work. They don't own your life.
Yeah, that's true. But if I'm working at home and I'm using their device, and there's an element of security that is now different. Just like, when we go outside, we're wearing masks and everything changed with COVID, and that was a culture shift. The culture shift should really switch when we are working from home. I've even noticed, and I've said it a few times actually in the last couple of weeks, there's actually a mind shift that's required when we're working at home, because we let that guard down when we traditionally would go to work and then we'd come home. That language has been used for centuries. You go to work and then you come home. And now we're not going to work, we're working at home. So mentally, we aren't actually prepared for it. I think there should be a set of rules and an acceptance of, if you're working from home and you have access to all this awesome stuff, you really have a level of responsibility.
I'm uncomfortable with an organization coming and dictating to me what can and can't be at my home office.
No,
That
that's
is
not
what
what
they
I'm
have an
saying.
office for. And they have those rules when I'm in the confines of their facility because I submit to their rules and agree to obey the rules when I enter the office.
So do you
On
think
the
it's unfair for someone to say to you, James, when you're at home, lock your computer? If you work outside in a cafe, lock your computer. Don't leave it around.
No,
Don't leave stuff.
that's different. So let's not compare working from home to working at a cafe.
All
Because
right, I won't
working at
mind
a
your waters.
cafe, we had rules for that even before COVID, right? The traveling salesman, the traveling nomad, we had rules for those people as well. So
Okay.
that's not really legitimate per se to say
Now I'm bringing in a
now,
red herring into the argument. I understand. So
right? Like let's stick to one thing because our topic today is really diversity, inclusion, and privacy, and as long as international password, and this is a great segment into it because we're talking about privacy. And I want to insist on this topic for a second.
look, I got to tell something for Allah in the room here in Clubhouse, and I appreciate you're in here, I really do. And to all of our listeners who are listening live on LinkedIn and Facebook, really appreciate your time. We're shifting from International Password Day commentary into privacy, and James is very passionate about privacy, which I really do appreciate. He's opened my eyes up to a lot of things, a lot of controversial things, and has certainly shifted my opinion. So over to you, James.
So we wanted to talk about today kind of like the idea of diversity and inclusion and privacy. People go, James, what does that have to do with anything? And I'm like, you'd be surprised when you look at how companies target data because we talked about 14.5
Yep.
and the OS. If you guys missed our Clubhouse room on Monday, you guys really shouldn't have. You guys can tune in Monday mornings. I think it's 8 a.m. our time. It's 9:30 Eastern times in Sydney, 9:30
I think
p.m.
that's right.
Eastern.
Yep, I'll just
You
check.
guys should really tune into that conversation. But we talked about 14.5, and that's kind of where this diversity and inclusion and privacy came from, is because there's an inherent challenge of how companies kind of look at their users and their products, because we're a product for a lot of them, and how they violate privacy in a way that makes you wonder, really, because they don't do the same for everyone. And that's a very interesting thing, and I think it's something that we need to put up front and center, because when they're tracking kids in the Philippines and those kids in the Philippines have no privacy rights and they're using
Yep.
that data, and we know that that data leads to child pedophiles ending up in the Philippines or Cambodia or Vietnam. We know that Facebook is a tool that's used for that. We also know that Twitter is a tool that's used for that. And at the end of the day, people go like, I don't really care as long as my privacy is protected. And you're like, yeah, because I live in the US or Europe or Australia, and I have privacy rights and rules, and I'm and a little bit more educated, and I have a little bit more of that. But we see the same being done here in the States. The human trafficking on social media is insane, and it primarily targets communities that don't have the means, and those people don't really understand their rights to privacy.
Yeah, true. So what can we do?
It's actually a very interesting scenario, to be honest. It's a bunch of different things. It starts with user and corporate responsibility, with these companies really allowing this stuff to happen. And the idea that you're a product, but you're also being corrupted in the same process. So Think of there's a really funny comedian, and he talks about fast food places, and he goes, "Did you know that McDonald's burgers aren't really made with? They're made from 100% beef. They're not made of 100% beef. So meaning a burger is made with 100% beef, but that could be 10% of the burger. The rest of it is silicone and all
Yep.
kinds of different things to juice it up, to add flavor to it so that you eat it. But then the rest of it, like only 10% of it is 100% beef. Like, and the rest of it is not. And then that's almost the same here, right? Like like people tell you, you've got a little bit of here's our privacy argument, right? You've got 10% privacy, and really everything else is just loaded up with things that you really don't have any control over.
Geez, I've never thought about that before. So from the other side of cyber, as we look at that human element, because that's the key, there's so much going on in the world of cyber. And even if we look at privacy, and as we spoke with the 14.5 update, the iOS update, and how that privacy is so critical, and it's really shifting the needle when it comes to the power now that we have to choose. And I think that is something we've been waiting for a long time. We've been educated to understand how important it is to have that choice, because I'm happy to opt in for all sorts. I'm also happy to have the choice to opt out and change that as I go forward with whatever I'm doing or using. So when we look at privacy from a diversity and inclusion point of view, how does that impact, I suppose, the everyday human, James? What kind of things do they need to consider with the usual things that they're interacting with online?
But that kind of goes back to our previous conversation a minute ago. Well, does the company have a right to tell you when you're working from home what you can and can't have on your desk? Right. And where do you draw the line between I'm doing my job and I do my work, and as long as I do my work and reach my goals and I'm not a threat vector, what right does the organization have to come and tell you, JJ, you can't have a microphone next to your computer, your work computer, or you can't have this hooked up to this because we don't want you to do it?
And look, I agree with that. And the cat's back. Beetroot's back for everybody who can't see. You're missing out. She's a beauty.
We do have a comment from LinkedIn. That's my good friend John Dela Cruz, who says, "Good morning. Didn't know it's International Password Day. I'm finding the show worth getting up early for. Loving the conversation." Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. That's a lovely thing to say. And this is the interesting thing. This is where policy comes into play in communication. I agree with what you just said. I'm thinking more of the lines of the duty of care you have when it comes to looking after our equipment, the duty of care of not letting your kids use the work computer, the duty of care of if you have private and confidential information you've printed out, don't just leave it on your desk. Just put it somewhere safe. It's that kind of thing I'm talking about, James.
But you're home. But you're home. It's your castle.
But it's still, if you get out into the bad habit, like if we get into the habit of, like with Zoom, not wearing high heel shoes, let me tell you, I can't wear high heels anymore. I have not worn them for so long. Ugg boots, my shoe of choice, and tracksuit pants and pajamas. That's what we do. This working from home has changed a lot of the habits. So I'm going out next week, traveling to do some in-person events, which is so exciting. And it's like, oh my God, I have to get a new pair of shoes because I can't wear heels anymore. And that might sound ridiculous, but it's habits we've got into, which has actually changed the way I do what I do based on the new environment. So I think there's some things, like with a company car. If you're given a company car, you can't just go crazy with it. There are still, some of them say you can't smoke in them. You can, obviously you can't say you can't have kids in them, but you've got to keep it clean. You've got to keep it serviced. All those things that come with the privilege of a company car. I personally think, and we have agreed to disagree before, but I think there are some basic things that we should be doing the right thing for at home, from a protection point of view, from a privacy point of view, protecting the organizations we work for.
So let me revise my statement around what the business has a right to tell you and what they don't have a right to tell you.
Communications are key.
And coming from a CISO perspective, I can tell you to please keep confidential information in a locked drawer. I can ask you, I can make it a policy. I have no way of enforcing that policy because I'm not going to show up at your house at, 10 p.m. right when you're getting ready to, go to sleep and be like, hey, JJ, surprise inspection. Let's see your work desk. I
I
see
know
you're
that.
in a bunch of passwords on sticky notes. And is this a confidential contract right there on your desk? And
But you
are,
have to have
are,
some form, surely.
are you
Some
watching Netflix on your personal computer while working? Are you streaming something, JJ? Like, it's very interesting because I'll tell you, this kind of goes into the concept of there's policies around locking your computer and keeping
Yep.
information confidential and all of that. That's all good and dandy, but I'm in my castle.
Look, I get it. And I think this is one of those interesting, because I'm wondering if it's the unconscious bias coming into play here. I want to do the right thing. That is my nature. I want to do the right thing. So with working from home, which I've done for many years, with where I work now, I ask very specific questions. What can and can't I do on a work device? And there are clear guidelines. And of course, on any device, if anyone thinks that they can't find out what you're doing, of course they can. I'm very true to that. So I make sure that if I'm going to do streaming on Netflix, I'll do it on my own computer. But at the same time, if I was traveling and I wanted to watch Netflix while I was traveling on my work device, that would be okay because it's a bit of a different circumstance. It's understanding the basic requirements of privacy that you have a right to. However, there has to come a time, even as a CISO or a CISO, you would like to hope that the people who have your equipment at home have some knowledge and awareness of the right thing to do. Like, don't put Post-it notes up on things behind you with passwords, for example, surely.
Surely I can agree with that. We when COVID started, I made a security best practices PDF.
Yep.
And I rolled it out to the entire organization. And I said some very common sense stuff, and I said some stuff to be very mindful of and very conscientious of. And I didn't want to add more pressure to an already stressful situation. And I
Yeah, but
think
what
that's,
about now?
you don't want, people were already, when COVID broke, people were wound tight. There was a lot of uncertainty. Organizations were wound up tight. Leadership was wound up tight. So you kind of have to come with a balance. And you can adjust things slightly as you go along. And we've done that. We've adjusted some stuff and removed some policies from my original document. We're
Yep.
on version 3 of a document I made a year ago because we've made adjustments, because we've seen things and we're like, okay, we should probably add this. By the way, this is nonsense. We can't do anything about it. Let's just get rid of it. It's pointless, right?
James, I remember when everyone started to work remotely and there were some companies with people, some friends of mine where they worked, and they were telling me that the companies wanted to actually set cameras up, key loggers, and all sorts of things to record. I'm thinking, what the heck? Like, where is the trust gone? And obviously that really got pushed back because that was out in the media quite a bit, that level of trust and that line of privacy. And to your point, so that's why I'm saying unconscious bias. I'm stepping away from my own unconscious bias, thinking, do they have a right? Does an organization have a right to do that spot check at 2 a.m. to see if I've got my setup properly and I, haven't got my computer unlocked? So it's a very interesting conversation to have.
So I've been in that position where I've had a bunch of people come pitch me. We'll put live cameras on your employees and you can monitor and we can tell you how long they've been active on their devices and you'll have all this wonderful, amazing data. And I went, whoa.
And they think it's fine.
Well, yes, but that to me is just wow. So privacy to me is very important, and it goes into the lines of the stuff that I've seen over the last 3 years that I've been really paying a lot of attention to privacy, where I noticed that companies look at privacy rules differently per population. So something very interesting. If you take terms and conditions in English to an American or a British or an Australian or Canadian user, they have specific things in them that give you the user power. But read them in Spanish or Portuguese
Yeah.
and they're very, very different. They're very different. I had,
Never thought about that.
and this is where I look at diversity and inclusion and privacy and I go, whoa, these companies value privacy very differently per population based on your consciousness of it. So if you're not very conscientious of it, they will take as much as you give them. But if you're very conscious of your privacy, then they tend to adjust their language a little bit to give you more, I want to say more, feel better.
The false sense of security.
I don't want to say the false sense of security, the false sense of privacy, maybe.
False sense of privacy. Yeah. Wow. This has been just sometimes our conversations go in ways I don't expect. And you're listening to The Other Side of Cyber, my friends. For those of you watching us and listening to us live, and to our friend Ala in Clubhouse, I really do appreciate you being here. We usually finish up our live recordings with about 30 minutes, so we'll do that shortly. Then we stop recording and love to have you up to have a chat, Ala, and answer any questions that anyone that is watching or listening would like to know as well, because that's what we do. We have another chat for half an hour, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes on the topic, because it's the beginning of James's day and it's the end of mine. So what else can we think about from the diversity and the inclusion perspective? I'm now thinking about the accessibility for the 15%, the people who are disabled. How does it work for them with the way they go about accessing different tools and things online? How does privacy work for them? I've never thought about it until right now.
It doesn't. So think of someone who's blind, who's got to communicate through audio only on all his devices. So essentially think of how we use Siri. They have no other way but to use Siri to get into anything.
Yeah.
And we have our good friend here, James McQuiggan, saying good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, James.
And so they actually have less rights over their data simply because imagine if they had to listen to the whole terms and conditions being read out loud to them to agree.
Wow. Because I've had the privilege of engaging more with this group of people on Clubhouse, and I am noticing the experience they have with an app such as Clubhouse and other things and computers is something I actually feel I have a duty of care to actually understand more about their experience of what they actually go through, because everything we talk about tends to be for the non-15%. And just to that point, James, there's no way they're going to go through all the terms and conditions. So how does that work? Do they just accept or not?
Yep, they just accept or not. If you're blind and you want to use Facebook, you accept. Irregardless, you use audio to put your posts or have stuff read back to you, and you're being monitored the entire time. I mean, same applies for most social media platforms, and same applies for a lot of companies that do this stuff. It's really disheartening to see that. When you talk about the handicap community, the people who might be blind or deaf or have physical challenges that don't allow them to interact with technology similarly to someone who may be a bit healthier. But and that's on the inclusion side. On the diversity side, we see different ways tracking is being done and features are being launched by organizations based on geographical locations. And we see that even in the US, where Facebook will do a pilot program in Baltimore. And why Baltimore? So Baltimore's historically, I think it's like 50 or 60% poverty minority folks that live in the city of Baltimore. Yeah. And so they'll use, and all of those people use that and use Facebook. So Facebook will use their data, and the violation of their privacy is kind of a way to do what they deem as testing. on consumers with different products or different algorithms. And we've seen that done in Baltimore. I've seen it done in different parts of the country where they go to, we've seen it done in states like West Virginia. West Virginia is the poorest state in the union. It has the highest drug rate abuse of any state in the United States.
Wow.
It's there's not a lot of wealthy people in West Virginia. West Virginia was a mining and coal state until, the climate change initiatives kind of started, and they killed that entire industry. And the government that said, hey, we're here to protect the environment, isn't protecting its own citizens there. They've left them up to deal with fentanyl overdoses that happen at a rate over there that's 3 times the national, or 3 or 4 times the national average last time I checked.
So how do things work for that group of people then when it comes to?
It doesn't. They use,
Yeah.
listen, here's the thing though. These people they're not looking at technology the same way you and I do. They're not
No.
looking at privacy. And these companies really look at this and go, great, here's a bunch of unconscious people that we can run all kinds of different algorithms on and try all these different things on. And they influence the mind. So if you ever seen, there's a documentary on Netflix called Coded Bias.
I haven't seen it yet. Thank you for
You should.
reminding me. Okay. Coded Bias.
So there's a part in Coded Bias where something comes up, and to me, it's fascinating. They give an example of how Facebook, in the 2012 elections, drove 300,000 people to the polls.
Yep.
And they show the box that you saw on Facebook, and it said, I voted, find your polling place. And they had one box that had nothing on it. And then they had another box, right?
Yeah.
And the other box had pictures of your friends.
Ooh.
And so I saw that JJ and James and John and Ella all voted. So I'm like, I got to go vote.
That's
and it
interesting.
drove 300,000 people to go to the polls who had no intention of voting in 2012. So imagine 2016, which was a very contentious election, and the last one. Let that sink in for a minute. See how they manipulate technology, how they look at it, how they present something so little, like an image of your friend next to a voting thing, and all of a sudden you're triggered.
That is something, I've written that down, manipulating technology, because I think that's another great topic. And I'm aware of the time. So what we are going to do is wrap up our live recording, which means we'll play a bit of music, and then we're still here. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be open for questions. And also in the room of the club, in the clubhouse. So thank you so much for joining us for our live people. This is JJ and the awesome James Azar in the other side of cyber. James, anything you'd like to say before we finish up recording site?
No, so we're going to stay here and Clubhouse, or are we going to move this entire conversation to Clubhouse?
I don't know. It's up to you. What do you want to do, James? This is all new.
We should move the entire call. I think we should move everything to Clubhouse.
All right. Well, we'll move the whole thing to Clubhouse. I love it.
Come join us in Clubhouse. If you don't have an invite, just message me or JJ, and we'll send you an invite.
And I'll open the room up. So Allah, bear with us. We'll be right there. I'm going to play music, and we'll see you all next time, my friends, on the other side of cyber.
Indeed.